So if we're in a bacterial world, and the thing that really drives bacteria to become resistant to antibiotics is using antibiotics, then we have our problems in hospitals and in clinics for sure. I'm not largely going to talk about that, although I'm happy to answer any questions about it. What I want to focus on is the other side of the coin, that we've created a way of growing food, specifically producing meat and dairy, that relies on antibiotics. Not just a little antibiotics, but a ton of antibiotics. It's kind of integral to the American model for growing meat. That's not necessarily true elsewhere, and it's not all kinds of meat production. I mean, there's organic meat production. By definition, if you want to be a certified organic producer, guess what? You're not allowed to use antibiotics. Now, if say you're an organic producer and one of your cows gets sick, one of your pigs gets sick, do you just let it die? No, you don't. What you do is you treat it, but then you have to ship it off to a different setting. You can't sell it as organic. It's kind of interesting. There's actually different definitions of organic in different places. In Europe, you can treat a sick organic animal and still sell it as organic. So that's actually, from my perspective, a good thing, because we don't want farmers to not treat sick animals. We just want them to treat only when necessary, just like us, right? We don't want to treat people unnecessarily with antibiotics either. So anyway, this modern American model of farming animals, one that uses a lot of antibiotics, that started just about the time penicillin was first produced, only a few years later, and it's been ramping up ever since. So we have a choice here about how we want to grow animals, how we want to raise meat. Other countries have made a different choice, and I'm going to talk about that later, but we could make a different choice too. Why do we use antibiotics in these American factory farms? That's what a lot of people call them, factory farms. Why do we use so many antibiotics? Well, yes, we treat sick animals. And as I said, that's a desirable thing. Turns out that's just a teeny fraction. The FDA, the way it collects data on antibiotic use, for one thing, it doesn't really do a good job. There's absolutely no collection on the farm. So I can't go to a particular farm and ask them, well, I can't go on most farms. But if I could and I were to ask them, there's no government agency asking them how many antibiotics they use and why they're using antibiotics. It's definitely a good idea. Other countries do that for all the reasons you can imagine, because we want to know where antibiotics are being used. We don't do that. So in the absence of that, we can only guess. But the best guess I have for you is that only a small portion of the antibiotics used in the country are being used to treat sick animals. How do I know that? Well, 95% of the human drugs used on farms, so those are called medically important antibiotics, 95% of them are in formulations that are added to animal feed. So it's not like, hey, my cow's sick, I'm going to give it an injection and it's going to get better, right? That would be the ideal. No, we're just putting enormous amounts of antibiotics into animal feed for a lot of different reasons. Usually not because they're sick. And in fact, mostly those herds of animals aren't sick. In the past, a lot of the antibiotics were being fed to animals to make them grow quicker. Growth promotion is what it was called. It was legal up until 2 years ago. It was legal to put penicillins and tetracyclines, millions of pounds every year, into animal feed to make animals grow faster. It was identified as a problem by FDA itself in 1977. They said this probably, we can't guarantee this is safe. In 1977, FDA put out a rule. They said, hey, we think this should stop. penicillins and tetracyclines shouldn't be put into animal feed. And Congress slapped their wrists and said, don't do that. Don't stop that. And so FDA ever since has never taken an antibiotic out of animal feed that it had already approved until, well, no, it had never taken an antibiotic out of animal feed. What it did 2 years ago is that it said to the industry, we want you to stop selling antibiotics for use in animal feed to promote growth. And then after the companies all agreed to that, finally, after decades, then FDA changed the labels so that that could no longer be done legally. But FDA has never gone to industry and said, we won't let you do that anymore. They'll say, please, please, please don't do that anymore. And this time, fortunately, the companies agreed. Why else do we put antibiotics into animal feed? Why else do we put them on farms? Controlling disease, what's that? Well, that's when you've got a herd, and keep in mind some of these hog barns might be 5,000 animals, maybe more, and some of those animals are sick. And you want to treat the whole herd to control the disease from spreading within that herd. That's called disease control. So you have a diagnosis, you're a vet, you have a diagnosis that some of the animals are sick, you don't want it to go through the entire herd and maybe kill much of the herd. So you control it. Now hopefully, just like in human medicine, this is a one-time deal, and you give the antibiotic for a period of time and then you stop. So that's a possibility, and that can be through putting antibiotics in feed, but I don't really think that's mostly why antibiotics are used on farms either. I think some of the use is disease control. But I think almost all the use now is for what's called disease prevention. Well, that sounds great, right? Everybody wants to prevent something bad. Let's prevent disease. But in fact, what this is a lot of the same products that were used for growth promotion on their labels said to be used for growth promotion or disease prevention. So FDA said, hey, we're not going to use them for growth promotion anymore. But they can still be used for disease prevention. Same product, same dosage, same length of time. Both of them are animal feed products, but now we're going to call it disease prevention. And this is what we've really been worried about. This is what we've really been worried about the last several years, because everybody in Congress has said, we don't want to legislate, we want to wait for FDA to take action. And all FDA ever said is we're going to get rid of the growth promotion, but we're going to leave disease prevention in place. Again, often the same products, given in the same way, at the same or equivalent dosages. And that's where we are right now.